Beaten until she could barely stand, she was lifted by the cowboy who said, "You'll stand with me." The whip cracked again, and Clara dropped to her knees in the dirt. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth as ranch foreman Dutch Keller raised his arm for another strike. She had been caught trying to steal bread from the main house kitchen, and in this corner of Wyoming territory, theft meant punishment swift and brutal. "Please," she whispered, but her voice barely carried. Dutch grinned, his yellow teeth showing through his beard. "Should have thought about that before you took what wasn't yours, girl." The other ranch hands formed a loose circle, watching with dead eyes. Nobody interfered when Dutch decided someone needed teaching. Clara tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. The world spun, and she tasted copper. That's when the gunshot split the air. Dutch froze, his whip hand still raised. Every head turned toward the sound. A rider approached on a gray horse, moving at an easy trot despite the weapon he'd just fired into the sky. The man wore a dusty brown coat and a hat pulled low, casting shadows across his face. "Drop it," the stranger said, his voice quiet but carrying authority that made Dutch's hand twitch. "This ain't your business, cowboy," Dutch spat. "Girl's a thief. I am within my rights." The rider dismounted in one smooth motion. As he stepped closer, Clara could see his face now, weathered and lean, with eyes the color of storm clouds. A scar ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone. "Maybe she is a thief," the man said, "but I'm making it my business now." Dutch laughed, but there was uncertainty in it.
"You know who runs this ranch?"
"Garrison don't take kindly to strangers interfering with his operations. Then Garrison and I will have words." The stranger moved past Dutch and knelt beside Clara. Up close, she could see kindness in those gray eyes, something she hadn't seen in months. "Can you hear me?" She nodded weakly. "What's your name?" "Clara," she managed. "I'm Jack Porter. You're gonna be all right." He stood and faced Dutch again. "She's leaving with me." Dutch's face reddened. "The hell she is. She owes Mr. Garrison for the food she stole, plus damages for breaking into the house." Jack reached into his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it to Dutch, who caught it reflexively. The coins inside clinked heavily. "That should cover it, plus interest," Jack said. "Now step back." Dutch opened the pouch, his eyes widening at the amount. Greed warred with authority on his face, but greed won. He stepped aside. Jack bent and lifted Clara carefully, one arm under her knees and the other supporting her back. She was light as a child, all bone and sinew. He carried her to his horse and somehow managed to mount while holding her. She slumped against his chest, barely conscious. "You're making a mistake, cowboy," Dutch called out. "Mr. Garrison won't forget this." Jack looked back, his expression hard. "Tell Mr. Garrison that Jack Porter took her. Tell him I'll be at the old Carson place if he wants to discuss it. And Dutch?" He paused. "Next time I see you raise a whip to someone who can't fight back, I won't fire into the air." He turned the gray horse and rode away at a walk, keeping Clara steady against him. Behind them, Dutch stood in the yard, the pouch of coins heavy in his hand and murder in his eyes. Clara drifted in and out of awareness as they rode. She caught fragments of the journey, the steady rhythm of the horse's hooves, the warmth of Jack's coat, the smell of leather and sage. When she finally opened her eyes fully, they'd stopped in front of a small ranch house nestled in a valley between two hills. Jack dismounted and carried her inside, laying her gently on a cot near the fireplace. The interior was simple but clean. A single room with a table, 2 chairs, and shelves lined with supplies. "You'll stand with me now," Jack said quietly, covering her with a blanket. "Nobody's going to hurt you again." Clara wanted to ask why he was helping her, what he wanted in return, but exhaustion pulled her under before the words could form. As she slipped into sleep, she heard him moving around the cabin, stoking the fire, preparing something that smelled like soup. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Jack sat by the fire through the night, his rifle across his knees, watching the door. He knew Dutch wouldn't let this go. Men like that never did, but he'd meant what he said. Clara was under his protection now, and he'd die before he let them take her back. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Jack checked his ammunition and settled in to wait. Morning would bring trouble, he was certain of that. But tonight, at least, one person would sleep without fear. The fire crackled and popped, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jack thought about the road that had led him here, all the choices and chances that had brought him to this moment. He'd been drifting for years, ever since the war ended, looking for something he couldn't name. Maybe he'd found it. Clara stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't make out. Jack added another log to the fire and pulled his coat tighter. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Dawn broke cold and gray over the Wyoming Valley. Clara woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. For a confused moment, she thought she was dreaming, that she'd wake up back in the bunkhouse where Dutch kept the workers, cold and hungry and afraid. Then she saw Jack at the stove, his back to her, and memory flooded back. She tried to sit up and gasped at the pain. Every muscle screamed protest. Her back felt like raw meat where the whip had landed. Jack turned at the sound. You took a beating yesterday. Your body needs time to heal. Why did you help me? The question came out hoarse. He poured coffee into a tin cup and brought it to her. Because you needed help. Here, drink this slowly. The coffee was hot and bitter and wonderful. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. Nobody helps anyone for free. What do you want? Jack returned to the stove, flipping the bacon. I want you to get strong again. I want you to remember what it feels like to be treated like a human being. Beyond that, we'll figure things out as we go. Dutch will come for me. Mr. Garrison, too, probably. I know. So why risk it? You don't even know me. Jack plated the bacon and brought it over with a fork. Eat first, then we'll talk. Clara hadn't tasted real food in so long that the first bite nearly made her cry. She'd been surviving on scraps and whatever she could steal. At Garrison's ranch, workers got thin soup and hard bread, barely enough to keep working. Jack watched her eat, then said, 3 years ago I was in a town called Silver Creek. Saw a man beating his horse in the street. I told him to stop. He pulled a gun on me. I was faster. He paused, staring at something only he could see. Turned out the man was the mayor's son. I had to leave town in the middle of the night, with nothing but my horse and what I could carry. So you know what it's like, Clara said quietly. I know that the world's full of bullies who think power gives them the right to hurt others. I know that if good people don't stand up, evil wins by default. He met her eyes. And I know that I'm tired of looking the other way. Clara set down the empty plate. I can't pay you back. I don't have anything. Didn't ask for payment. Then what happens now? Jack walked to the window and looked out across the valley. Now we wait. Dutch will report to Garrison. Garrison will decide whether I'm worth the trouble. If he's smart, he'll write you off as a loss and move on. If he's proud, he'll send men. Which do you think he is?
Proud. Which men usually are.
Clara pushed herself to a sitting position, ignoring the pain. Then, maybe I should go. I can head north, find work somewhere else. You've done enough. You can barely stand. I'll manage. Jack turned back to her, his expression firm but not unkind. You're staying until you can ride without falling off a horse. After that, if you want to leave, I won't stop you. But I won't throw you out half dead either. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion washed over her again. The effort of sitting up had drained what little strength she had. Jack helped her lie back down. Rest now. We've got time before anyone shows up. This valley's a full day's ride from Garrison's main ranch. You know a lot about his property. I know a lot about a lot of things. He pulled the blanket up to her shoulders. Sleep, Clara. I'll keep watch. She wanted to stay awake, to understand this strange cowboy who'd risked himself for a stranger, but her eyes wouldn't cooperate. Within minutes, she was asleep again. Jack returned to the window. The valley stretched out before him, yellow grass bending in the wind. Hills rose on either side, covered in pine and scrub oak. It was good defensive ground, which was part of why he'd chosen this place when he'd ridden into the territory 2 months ago. He'd been looking for work, maybe a fresh start. The Carson place had been abandoned for years, but the bones were good. He'd fixed the roof, cleared out the debris, made it livable. The plan had been to stay through winter, then move on in spring. Now he had a reason to stay longer. Movement caught his eye. 3 riders, still distant but heading this direction. Jack's jaw tightened. That was faster than he'd expected. Garrison must have sent them immediately after Dutch reported in. He checked his rifle, then his 2 pistols. Ammunition was adequate, but not unlimited. If it came to a fight, he'd need to make every shot count. The riders drew closer. Jack recognized Dutch in the lead, his bulk unmistakable even at this distance. The other 2 were ranch hands he'd seen in the yard yesterday. All 3 were armed. Jack stepped outside, closing the door behind him. No point in letting them know exactly where Clara was. He walked out to meet them, stopping about 50 yards from the cabin. Dutch reined in his horse, flanked by the other 2 riders. Up close, Jack could see the man was furious, his face red and his eyes hard. You made a big mistake, Porter, Dutch said. Seems to be a habit of mine. Mr. Garrison wants his property back. Clara's not property. Dutch spat into the dirt. She's a thief and a runaway. The law's on our side. Out here, the nearest sheriff is 3 days' ride. By the time he got here, assuming he even cared, this would all be settled one way or another. One of the other riders, a thin man with a scar on his chin, spoke up. Boss says if you hand her over now, you can ride away. No hard feelings. Jack smiled without humor. And if I don't, then we take her by force, Dutch said. And you don't ride away at all. 3 against 1. You boys must be real confident. Dutch's hand moved toward his gun. Last chance, cowboy. Jack's stance shifted slightly, weight balanced, hand near his weapon. You draw that iron, Dutch. You better be ready to use it, and you better be faster than me. The tension stretched thin as wire. The other 2 riders exchanged glances, suddenly looking less certain. They'd been told this would be easy, that one drifter wouldn't dare stand against Garrison's men. They hadn't been told about the look in Jack Porter's eyes, cold and steady as winter stars. Dutch's hand hovered over his gun, indecision written across his features. He was a bully, used to backing down weaker opponents, but something in Jack's stillness told him this wouldn't be like those other times. You can't watch her forever, Dutch finally said, moving his hand away from his weapon. You gotta sleep sometime. Gotta leave sometime. And when you do, we'll be waiting. Then I guess we understand each other, Jack said. Now, get off my land. It's Garrison property. The Carson place hasn't belonged to Garrison for 5 years. Public record, you check. I got squatter's rights, minimum. You want to dispute it? Bring the law. Otherwise, you're trespassing. Dutch's jaw worked, but he had no answer. After a long moment, he yanked his horse around. This ain't over. Didn't think it was, Jack said. The 3 riders departed, but Jack noticed they didn't head back toward Garrison's ranch. Instead, they took up position on a rise about half a mile away. Watching! Jack returned to the cabin. Clara was awake, sitting up with the rifle he'd left by her cot held awkwardly in her hands. They're gone for now, he said gently, taking the weapon. But they're not leaving. They're going to wait us out. I heard, she said. I should go, Jack. This is going to get you killed. Maybe. Or maybe I'll surprise them. He set the rifle by the door and returned to the stove. Either way, the decision's made. No point second-guessing it now. Why are you so calm? Jack poured himself coffee and sat at the table. Been in worse spots. During the war, I spent 3 days pinned down in a barn with 12 men trying to kill me. Came out alive. This is only 3 men. 3 men working for one of the richest ranchers in Wyoming. He's got dozens more he can send. But he won't. Not yet, anyway. Jack sipped his coffee. Men like Garrison, they have a process. First, they send the foreman to handle it quiet. When that doesn't work, they escalate slowly, trying to minimize attention. He'll make offers, then threats, then eventually force. But each step takes time. How do you know? Because I've dealt with men like him before. They're all the same. Power makes them predictable. Clara studied him across the room. You're not just a drifter, are you? That's exactly what I am. Drifters don't talk about tactics and power dynamics. They don't have money to throw around like you did yesterday. Jack smiled slightly. You're observant. That's good. You'll need that. Who are you really, Jack Porter? He set down his coffee and met her eyes. I'm someone who got tired of fighting other people's wars. I'm someone who lost everything that mattered and spent 5 years trying to figure out what comes next. I'm someone who saw a woman being beaten and couldn't walk away. He paused. That enough of an answer? For now, Clara said softly. They fell into silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The 3 riders remained on their distant hill, patient as vultures. Days passed in strange routine. Jack tended to the horses and kept watch while Clara slowly regained her strength. Her back healed, the welts fading to pale lines. She helped with cooking and cleaning, moving carefully at first, then with growing confidence. They talked, sharing pieces of their pasts. Clara told him about growing up in Ohio, her parents dying of fever when she was 15, the long journey west looking for a better life. She'd been working at Garrison's ranch for 8 months, treated barely better than livestock. Jack shared less, but she learned he'd been a soldier, then a scout, then a dozen other things. He'd ridden from California to Kansas and back again, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. Why not? She asked one evening as they sat by the fire. Roots require something worth staying for, he said simply. On the 5th day, a different rider appeared. This one came alone, carrying a white flag tied to a stick. Jack met him outside, rifle in hand. The messenger was young, barely 20, with nervous eyes. Mr. Garrison requests a meeting. He's willing to discuss terms. What terms? He'll pay you double what you gave Dutch if you return the woman, plus compensation for your trouble. Not interested. The messenger swallowed hard. You said you'd say that, so he asked me to tell you this. He owns the land on 3 sides of this valley. He controls the water rights. Come spring, when the snow melts, he can divert the stream that feeds your well. He can make it so no supplies reach you. He can wait you out until you have no choice. Tell Mr. Garrison that's an interesting threat from a man who's never met me. He also said to tell you that Clara has family, a sister in Denver. Young girl, works at a dress shop. Would be a shame if something happened to her. Jack's expression went cold and dangerous. You tell Garrison that if he touches that girl, I'll burn his ranch to the ground and scatter his men like leaves. You tell him that threatening innocent people was the last mistake he gets to make. The messenger's face went pale. I'm just delivering the message, and now you're delivering mine. Go! The young man fled, spurring his horse into a gallop. Jack watched him go, then returned to the cabin where Clara stood in the doorway. You heard? He asked. She nodded, her face white. I didn't know Garrison knew about Katie. I never mentioned her to anyone. Men like him make it their business to know. It's how they maintain control. Jack set his rifle aside. Don't worry. I meant what I said. Nobody's touching your sister. How can you stop him? He's got men everywhere. Because I'm going to end this. Tonight. Clara grabbed his arm. That's suicide. Even if you could get past Dutch and those other men, Garrison's main house has guards. You'd never make it out alive. Probably not the way you're thinking, Jack said. But there's more than one way to handle a bully. He spent the afternoon preparing, checking weapons, packing supplies. Clara watched, her worry growing with each passing hour. As the sun set, Jack pulled on his coat and hat. Stay here. Keep the door barred. If I'm not back by dawn, take my spare horse and ride for Denver. Don't stop. Don't look back. Jack, please don't do this. He paused at the door, then walked back and took her hands in his. Listen to me. Men like Garrison, they only understand strength. If I run, he hunts us both forever. If I hide, he starves us out. The only way forward is through. Then let me come with you. What I'm about to do, I need to do alone. He squeezed her hands gently. Trust me, Clara. I've been preparing for something like this my whole life. I just didn't know it until now. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the darkness on his gray horse. Clara barred the door and sat by the fire, the rifle across her lap, counting the minutes and praying to a god she wasn't sure listened anymore. Jack rode through the night, but not toward Garrison's ranch. Instead, he headed east, toward the territorial capital. He pushed the gray hard, covering in hours what would normally take a full day. He reached the town of Cheyenne just as the sun rose, riding straight to a modest building on the edge of town. The sign read legal offices, but Jack knew better. He'd dealt with the man inside before. William Cross answered the door still in his nightshirt, but his eyes sharpened when he saw Jack. Porter. Not yet. I need a favor. Cross stepped aside, gesturing him in. Last time you needed a favor, I ended up testifying before a Senate committee. What is it this time? Information and leverage on a rancher named Garrison. Operates out of the Southern Valley. Cross moved to his desk and began pulling out files. Henry Garrison. Big operation, lots of political connections. What's your interest? He's threatening to kill an innocent woman. I need to convince him that's a bad idea. Killing you would be easier. He's trying that too. Jack accepted the coffee Cross poured him. What have you got on him? Cross spread files across the desk. Depends what you're looking for. His business dealings are mostly legitimate, if aggressive, but there are rumors. Land acquisitions that happened too conveniently after previous owners met unfortunate ends. Labor practices that skirt the edge of legal. And this. He pulled out a separate folder. 3 months ago, a federal land agent went missing. Last seen headed to Garrison's ranch to investigate water rights disputes. Jack studied the documents. This agent have family? Brother in Washington. Senator's aide. He's been making noise, but without evidence it goes nowhere. What if evidence surfaced? Cross leaned back, studying Jack. Then Garrison would have bigger problems than one drifter. Federal investigation, potential charges. He'd be fighting for his life in court, no time to worry about personal vendettas. He paused.
You have evidence?
Not yet, but I know where to look. Jack, if you're planning what I think you're planning, remember that Garrison's connected. You can't just walk onto his property and start digging. Who said anything about walking? Jack stood, finishing his coffee. I need you to send a telegram to that senator's aide. Tell him you've received credible information about his brother's disappearance. Tell him to expect documentation within the week. What documentation? Whatever I find tonight. Jack moved toward the door. One more thing. I need you to draw up a letter. If anything happens to me or to a woman named Clara or to her sister Katie in Denver, this all goes public. Every detail. Make sure Garrison knows that. Cross was already writing. This is dangerous, Jack, even for you. Everything worth doing is dangerous. Jack paused at the door. Thanks, William. I won't forget this. Just try to stay alive long enough for it to matter. Jack rode back toward the valley, but this time he approached Garrison's ranch from the east, using terrain and darkness to stay hidden. He left his horse a mile out and continued on foot. The ranch was massive, sprawling across a valley with the main house at its center. Jack counted 12 men on patrol, rotating in predictable patterns. Beyond the house sat a large barn, and beyond that a smaller structure that looked newer than the others. That was where he needed to go. He waited until the patrols shifted, then moved quickly across open ground using shadows and cover. His heart pounded, but his hands stayed steady. This was what he'd been trained for, years ago in a different life. The small building had a heavy lock, but Jack had come prepared. 2 minutes of careful work and he was inside. The interior was spare. A desk, filing cabinets, and in the corner partially covered by a tarp, something that made Jack's blood run cold. Surveying equipment, maps, and personal effects that clearly belonged to someone who wasn't coming back for them. Jack worked quickly, photographing documents with a small camera Cross had given him, gathering evidence. Letters detailing land deals, maps showing water diversions that violated federal law, and most damning, a journal that belonged to the missing land agent, documenting everything he discovered about Garrison's illegal operations. Knew someone would come eventually, a voice said from the doorway. Jack turned to find Henry Garrison himself standing there, flanked by 2 armed men. The rancher was tall and distinguished, his hair silver, his suit expensive. He looked more like a senator than a criminal. Just didn't expect it to be over a girl, Garrison continued. Dutch said you were crazy. I'm inclined to agree. Jack's hand rested near his gun, but he didn't draw. The odds were too poor. Your foreman beats women. Your men threaten children. Seems to me I'm the sane one here. Clara's a thief. She broke the law. So did you. Multiple times, according to these documents. Garrison's expression didn't change, but his men tensed. Those documents don't leave this building. Already too late. I have friends in Cheyenne, federal friends. They're expecting delivery tomorrow. If I don't show up, they come looking. And they'll find everything I found, plus more. You're bluffing. Am I? Test me and find out, or we can make a deal. Garrison studied him for a long moment. What kind of deal? You leave Claire alone.
You leave her sister alone. You leave me alone.
In exchange, your secrets stay secret. You avoid federal investigation, keep your ranch, keep your freedom. And if I refuse, then this all goes public. The land deals, the water rights violations, the missing federal agent. Your political friends won't be able to protect you from that. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison if you're lucky. Silence stretched between them. Jack could see Garrison's mind working, weighing options, calculating odds. Finally, the rancher nodded slowly. You have documentation to back up this threat? Detailed documentation. Already in the hands of people you can't reach. Then it seems we have an understanding. Garrison stepped aside, gesturing to the door. Take your girl and go. I never want to see either of you in this territory again. We'll leave when we're ready. But we won't be your problem anymore. Jack walked past Garrison and his men, every muscle tensed for a bullet that never came. He made it outside across the yard, back to his horse. Only when he was a mile away did he finally exhale. The ride back to the cabin took hours. Jack's mind raced with everything that could still go wrong. Garrison might change his mind, might decide to call his bluff. The evidence might not be enough. Federal agents might not care. But when he crested the final hill and saw the cabin below, smoke rising from the chimney, Clara silhouetted in the doorway watching for his return, he knew it had been worth the risk. Dismounted, and Clara ran to him, relief evident on her face. "You're alive," she said, almost accusingly. "Told you to trust me." He smiled, exhausted but triumphant. "It's over. Garrison won't bother us anymore." "How?" "What did you do?" "Made him understand that some fights aren't worth winning." Jack led the horse to the small barn. "We should still probably leave the territory, though, just to be safe." "Where will we go?" Jack paused, considering. "Denver, to see your sister. California, if you want ocean air. Montana, if you prefer mountains. I've got no ties, no obligations. For the first time in years, I can choose." Clara followed him into the barn, helping unsaddle the gray. "And you'd take me with you? Just like that? Unless you'd rather go alone. I'd understand if you wanted a fresh start without reminders of all this." She was quiet for a moment, running her hand along the horse's flank. "A week ago, I was alone, beaten, without hope. You gave me back my life, Jack Porter. Wherever you go, I'm going too, if you'll have me." He met her eyes across the horse. "Then I guess we're partners." "Partners," she agreed, and for the first time since he'd found her in that yard, she smiled. They spent the next week preparing to leave. Jack taught Clara to shoot, to ride properly, to survive on the trail. She proved a quick learner, adapting to each lesson with determination born of necessity. William Cross sent word that the documentation had reached the right people. Federal agents were opening an investigation into Garrison's operations. The rancher would be too busy defending himself to worry about revenge. On their last night in the cabin, they sat by the fire, sharing coffee and making plans. "Denver first," Clara said. "I need to see Katie, make sure she's safe. Then maybe California. I've always wanted to see the ocean. California it is, then. We can take our time, work when we need money, move when we want to move. No more running?" "No more running," Jack confirmed. "Just living. On our terms." Clara studied him in the firelight. "You never told me what you were running from, before all this." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "The war changed me. Made me good at things no man should be good at. After it ended, I kept doing those things because they were all I knew. Eventually, I realized I was becoming the kind of person I'd fought against. So I stopped, started drifting, looking for something better." "Did you find it?" He looked at her, at the strength that had grown in her over these past weeks, at the hope that had replaced the despair in her eyes. "Yeah, I think maybe I did." Morning came cold and clear. They packed the horses, took one last look at the cabin that had sheltered them, and rode out together toward whatever came next. Behind them, the valley stretched empty and peaceful. Ahead, the world waited, full of possibility. 3 months later, in a small church in Denver, Jack Porter and Clara stood together and made their partnership official. Katie was there, crying happy tears, alongside William Cross and a handful of others who'd helped along the way. They stayed in Denver through spring, then headed west as summer arrived. In California, they found work on a ranch owned by a widow who needed help and didn't ask too many questions. The ocean was everything Clara had dreamed, vast and blue and endless. One evening, watching the sunset over the Pacific, Clara asked, "Do you ever regret it? Risking everything for someone you didn't know?" Jack considered the question, his arm around her shoulders. Every choice has consequences. Sometimes you can't know which ones are worth making until after you've made them. But no, I don't regret it. Even if Garrison had killed you? Even then. Because some things matter more than survival. Dignity matters. Standing up matters.
You mattered, Clara. You still matter.
She leaned against him, watching the waves roll in. "I never thanked you properly. For seeing me as human when everyone else saw me as property, for giving me my life back." "You gave me something too," Jack said quietly. "Purpose. Direction. A reason to stop drifting and start living." They stood there together as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, the ranch house glowed warm with lamplight. Around them, the world continued its endless turning. Jack thought about all the roads he'd traveled, all the places he'd been, all the people he'd known. Each one had led him here, to this moment, to this woman, to this life. "You'll stand with me," he'd told her that first day, not knowing it was a promise he'd keep forever. And she had stood, not just survived, but thrived, growing stronger each day, building a life on her own terms. "What are you thinking about?" Clara asked. "How sometimes the best things in life come from the worst moments. How courage isn't about being unafraid, it's about doing what's right even when you are afraid. How one choice, one decision to not look away can change everything. Pretty deep thoughts for a cowboy. I'm full of surprises. Yes, you are. She turned to face him, her expression serious. Promise me something, Jack. Promise that no matter where we go or what we do, we'll always stand together, like you said that first day. He took her hands in his, holding them tight. I promise. From here on out, we stand together, no matter what comes. It was a promise he kept for the next 50 years, through drought and plenty, through joy and sorrow, through all the ups and downs that life brought their way. And when Clara's sister Katie came to visit years later, bringing her own children to meet their aunt and uncle, she saw two people who'd built something rare and precious. Not just a partnership, but a testament to the power of compassion, of courage, of choosing to stand up when it would have been easier to look away. The story of the beaten woman and the cowboy who saved her became something of a legend in those parts. Details shifted and changed with each retelling, but the core remained the same. That sometimes heroes aren't born. They're made by the choices they make in crucial moments. That standing up for what's right matters, even when the cost is high. That one person can make a difference. Jack and Clara never talked much about those early days. The memories were private, sacred in their way. But sometimes, on quiet evenings, they'd sit together and remember. The fear and the courage, the violence and the healing. The moment when two lives intersected and changed forever.
You saved me, Clara would say.
We saved each other, Jack would reply. And in the end, that was the truest thing of all. Not a tale of rescue, but of mutual salvation. Two people finding in each other what they'd been missing. Strength and gentleness. Courage and compassion. Purpose and peace. The gray horse that had carried them both that first day lived to a ripe old age, eventually passing peacefully in a sunny pasture by the Pacific. They buried him under an oak tree and planted flowers on the grave. The cabin in Wyoming stood empty for years before being reclaimed by the land, timbers weathering and collapsing until only the foundation remained. But the memory of what happened there lingered, a reminder that even the darkest moments can give birth to light. Garrison faced federal charges and lost much of his ranch, his power broken by the evidence Jack had gathered. Dutch disappeared, rumor said to Mexico. The workers at the ranch scattered to better situations, their bonds of servitude broken. And Jack and Clara built a life that proved what they'd both learned through hardship. That worth isn't determined by circumstances. That dignity is inherent, not granted. That love is stronger than fear, and hope more powerful than despair. They grew old together, their hair silver, their hands weathered by work and sun. When Jack finally passed, Clara held his hand and told him one last time that he'd been her hero. He smiled and told her she'd been his salvation. Katie inherited the ranch and kept it running, honoring the legacy her sister and brother-in-law had built. She told their story to her children, and they told it to theirs, each generation adding their own understanding to the tale. The last line remained constant across all the tellings. The promise Jack made and kept, the words that define their life together. You'll stand with me. And she had. Through everything life brought, through triumph and trial, through ordinary days and extraordinary moments, they had stood together, two people who found in each other exactly what they needed. Not perfection, but partnership. Not fantasy, but real, hard-won, beautiful truth. That was the story. That was the legacy. Two lives intertwined by chance and choice, by courage and compassion, by the simple decision to not look away when someone needed help. In the end, that's what mattered most. Not the violence they'd escaped or the obstacles they'd overcome, but the life they'd built together. A life of meaning and purpose, of love and partnership, of standing together against whatever came. The story ended as all stories must, but the truth it carried lived on, passed down through generations, that one moment of courage can change everything, that standing up for what's right matters, that we all have the capacity to be heroes if only we choose to act when the moment comes. Jack Porter had been a drifter, a soldier, a man without direction, beaten, without hope. Together they became something greater than either could have been alone. They became proof that redemption is real, that second chances exist, that no matter how dark the moment, there is always the possibility of light. That was their gift to the world. Not just a story, but a living example of what it means to stand together, to face life with courage and compassion, to never stop fighting for what's right. And somewhere in the vast sweep of history, in the countless small moments that make up human existence, their story remained. A testament to the power of choice, the strength of partnership, and the enduring truth that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply refuse to look away.